Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Feeling Seen, the podcast that talks about the movies that make us feel seen. And my co-host for the day is a Sundance sensation. His film, Dìdi, is about to be available for so many of you who were not in Park City, how dare you, to enjoy. The movie is Dìdi. This is a coming-of-age tale that... I don't know, it's great, you guys. It's been mentioned a lot in conversation with, like, Bo Burnham's 8th Grade, which a touch point of the coming-of-age genre, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about movies in that vein. Sean Wang, what else do the people need to know about you before we get started today?
That I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for the conversation, and I think they should know that I just ate some French fries for lunch. It's very important.
You are nutritiously sustaining yourself through an exhaustive press day. I'm glad you're nourishing yourself.
Yes.
Given that this will be a very sort of coming of age rooted discussion, and this movie, your movie, it folds in, I would say it seems like it folds in elements from your life. That's sort of like the foundational text of this movie. When did you realize this movie was in you to be made?
I'd say maybe like the seeds of it when my filmmaker brain really started turning on for it was 2017. Yeah, maybe like late 2017, probably late 2017. And that was really like the seed of the idea was, it was twofold. It was one, wanting to write a movie and make a movie that could be reverse engineered from the idea that I'm a first-time filmmaker that has never made a movie before, and what is the movie I can write where if you like the script, I'm the obvious director. And but on the flip side, I do love coming-of-age stories, and I do love personal stories where the filmmakers, you can feel them kind of trying to figure something out through looking at their adolescence. And I think that was true for me. And so the seed of the idea really was, what if you took Stand By Me, a movie like Stand By Me, but set it in a place that I know and had it star people who looked and talked and felt like the kids that I grew up with, and write hyper specifically to those characters on the page, and not just in the casting. What does that do to the movie? And that set me down a 7-year journey.
Okay, well, that's 7 years. That is such a, I feel like time, particularly for a coming-of-age story that is autobiographically rooted. And because with each passing year, you are further away from your, quote-unquote source material. And you have a different, perhaps a further perspective on that time from which you... So over the course of writing it then into making it, were there evolutions in how or what you wanted to say that you were like, this made sense 3 years ago, but by the time we've reached where I am right now in the process, I actually need to morph this a little bit because I have a different look at my life then?
Yes and no. I think the intention was always the same, which was, to look at that moment in my life, in everyone's life, in that 13-year-old adolescent period, but look at it in a way that was unvarnished and not trying to be nostalgic and not depict it in a way that was like rose-colored. But I think the biggest change over the course of the 7 years was maybe about halfway through. And it's not like I was working on it full time for 7 years. I was doing a bunch of other stuff. But maybe like a few drafts in, I was like, something's missing. And the early drafts were not really focused on the mother-son story or the family story. And I really had an urge to kind of explore that part of, this kid's life. And once I allowed myself to kind of do that, the movie and the script just kind of started to feel alive and electric for the first time. And I was like, oh, that's what the movie is. Like, they have to inform one another. And ultimately I was like, oh, the movie is a mother-son story, a love letter to my immigrant mom and other immigrant moms that I know, sort of encased in the trappings of a movie, again, like Stand By Me. It's going to start off as a movie about friendship and end as a movie about family. That's going to be the track.
And Joan Chen playing the mother. She has been in that seat. It's interesting seeing her in that seat a couple of times now, where I feel like Saving Face was a love letter to moms as well. And while it's a romantic comedy, it's an iconic romantic comedy, a queer romantic comedy, it is also the story of an immigrant family. And it's the story of this assimilated daughter and her very traditional Chinese mother, and like coming to know Joan Chen and these, God, just striking, gorgeous young woman actress, incredibly dynamic. And then to see her as the mother in that role, I feel like was I feel like that's an important point as a Joan Chen fan, to watch that transition in her career. And now, even decades beyond that, to see her in a similar, in at least a categorically similar kind of family love story role, and also love letter to mom. Joan Chen just brings the weight to these roles in such a gorgeous way.
100%. I agree. She's the best.
Did you know you were like, oh, I know, I want her for this, or was it like, who's gonna play this part?
A little bit of both, like obviously it would have been it would have been a dream to get Joan Chen.
Sure,
right?
of course.
I think when you look at the landscape of Asian and Asian American actresses who can play a role like this and bring some weight and experience to it, there aren't that many actors that fit the bill, and she's one of the ones that really, I think, to me was meaningful, not just as like who is well known, but like who is well known, but also like is a good fit for the role. Mm-hmm. And I remember seeing her in, before this, like the most recent thing I'd seen her in was Tiger Tail in 2020. Mm-hmm. And I remember she has like one scene stealing role in that movie. Mm-hmm. And the way that she depicted it was like so tender and sensitive and soft, but there's so much regret and so much like it's a very simple scene, but mm-hmm. I feel like her presence in that scene is just so deeply felt. And so we went out to her and luckily she said yes.
Well, congratulations on that. And, on everything, though, on everything else, the movie coming out this far, getting made, the miracle that is. And keeping in the coming-of-age conversation, the character that you brought for our discussion is Mason from the coming-of-age epic by Richard Linklater, Boyhood, which really has isn't every coming-of-age movie boyhood and or girlhood? He really swept up the concept on that one.
I know. How dare he?
So how was your day at school?
Fine.
Hey, I had a good meeting with Miss Butler this time. I kind of liked her.
What did she say?
Well, she said that you weren't turning in your homework assignments. And I told her I know he does them because I check them every night. She said she found a big chunk of them crumpled up at the bottom of your backpack.
She didn't ask for them.
Well, baby, she doesn't have to. You're just supposed to turn them in. And she said you're still staring out the window all day.
Not all day.
And she said that you destroyed her pencil sharpener.
Not on purpose.
Wait, she said that you crammed a bunch of rocks in it.
I thought if we could sharpen pencils, maybe we could sharpen rocks.
Well, what were you going to do with a bunch of sharpened rocks?
I was trying to make arrowheads for my rock collection.
Tell me about your first experience watching Boyhood.
Well, I picked Boyhood because it was this movie that I watched and fell in love with when it was out in theaters, and it came out for me at a very formative time in my life. I was about to transfer to film school. I went to community college for 2 years after I graduated high school with the hope of transferring to film school. Mm-hmm. And it came out that summer. It was summer of 2014, I believe.
Mm-hmm. I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and so I was in this very transitional phase of my life where it felt like something in my life was going to change. I was about to move away from home. Mm-hmm. And the kid in Boyhood, even though he's obviously a very different kid than me, he grew out his hair and became this emo kid who liked photography. Mm-hmm. I think the years that Boyhood chronicles are sort of very close to my own upbringing.
Yeah, there's a good amount of overlap there.
Yeah, and Soldier Boy needle drops. And it definitely struck a chord with me when it came out, the subject matter, the time period of the kid growing up. And so Yeah, there was just something about that film and the when it found me that was very special. And I saw it, yeah, first with myself and I think probably with my friends or something. And then I watched it with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a really special experience because I watched it with my dad too. It was my mom, my dad, and I remember like towards the end, my dad was like crying, and he's like a very typically like stoic, man. And I was like, oh shit, like he's crying. And then the movie ended, and he's like, pretty good.
I was thinking about that as I was watching it, as like considering your movie and how that like you kind of you and Mason, like you real Sean and Mason this character and consequently this actor, because it's like he's playing his age, it's playing it over the course of I think 12 years. You are existing in the same universe. Like the life that you are having and then the life that you're looking back on with your character in Fremont having, and then the life this boy Mason is having, that's in the same United States. And your character's having it in NorCal, and he's down in Texas. And so it was fun thinking about like, oh, there's a young Sean Wang, like, living as Mason does.
Dad, there's no, like, real magic in the world, right?
What do you mean?
Like elves and stuff. People just made that up.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what makes you think that elves are any more magical than something like a whale? You know what I mean? What if I told you a story about how underneath the ocean there was this giant sea mammal that used sonar and sang songs, and it was so big that its heart was the size of a car and you could crawl through the arteries. I mean, you'd think that's pretty magical, right?
Yeah. But, like, right this second, there's, like, no elves in the world, right?
No. Technically, no elves.
This movie goes kind of soft on the touch points. It feels kind of timeless in where it's at, but the needle drops are really what land you in places as this movie progresses. And a thing that I wanted to ask you about is in, I imagine like the concern is the story, the concern is the characters, but then in a period piece like coming of age story, there are also there's the aesthetics that root it where we other look at Now and Then, look at other Richard Linklater movies, Dazed and Confused, Everybody Wants Some, Eighth Grade, your film. How much does a coming of age movie owe that world building? Because yours, like, is such an incredible portrait of a millennial upbringing on the cusp of media 2.0 and social media breaking out, on the cusp of a child becoming a teenager. How much does the format owe that aesthetic and that packaging?
I think it's part of it. It's a huge part of it. It's the way I see these movies, at least the great ones, is on paper, they sound incredibly generic. Every coming of age movie sounds like the most generic movie ever. No, but really, it's like, what is the log line for like name a coming of age movie? Like name a classic.
Okay, Bo Burnham, eighth grade.
A 13-year-old girl comes of age in the last week of high school.
Yeah.
Right? Cool. Like sounds incredibly generic. But then you watch the movie and it's the world, it's the texture, it's the setting, it's every little detail about that world and that character and her surroundings and the music. And it's like every little thing gets stacked on top of one another and every little detail until finally it's like a tipping point. And it's like all of a sudden it's so specific and so detailed that it feels like a movie we've never seen before. Because how rich and vivid the world is and the character that exists within that world. And so that was kind of the bet that I wanted to take, which was like, I think the reason that all the great coming of age films, or at least the genre, the films that are bucketed in that genre, the reason they're good is because it's not about a kid, it's about that kid.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, again, that world, their perspective, and you really, that's why, you know, again, like Eighth Grade is a very different movie than Water Lilies, but they're both about 13, 14-year-old girls. It's like because their world is different, their perspective is different, their point of view is different. And so that was kind of the hope with our movie too, was like, if we can just, you know, make it so hyper specific to every little thing, the world, the internet, the time period, the music, and every little thing hopefully ends up sitting on top of one another until it really feels like, oh, this feels both hyper unique and hyper familiar at the same time. It's hopefully gives you the emotion that you get from in Eighth Grade or a 400 Blows or you know, these films that really take you through the ups and downs of adolescence in a way that you know, but then hopefully gets at it from an angle that you've never seen before.
And with it's such a, like, one of the things I love about horror, and one of the most true things about horror, is that it is a genre of tropes. Like, it is, you know, you have formulas that work, and there is genius to be had in disrupting or innovating or just doing the formula so damn well that it really sort of takes people by storm and grips them in a unique way, a uniquely affecting way. And since it is such a well-trod format, the coming-of-age story, I wondered, like, what were some of the more, like, trope elements of it that you were most excited to work with and play with and make your own, and perhaps some that you were like, I don't need to dabble in that to make mine because this is how I want to set it apart. But what were some of the things that you felt you were most excited to, like, work with the Play-Doh of?
That's a good question. I think I was really excited about this idea where and maybe I'm right or wrong, but like I feel like in most coming of age movies, in our lane, like the friendship ends up becoming the thing that they latch onto, or the crush. It becomes like, is he or is he not going to get the girl? Or it's like, you know, all these things. And the thing that I love about our movie and that I really try to set out to do is that, like, none of those things end up becoming the movie. It's like the friends that he has in the beginning, like, they are not the main point of the story by the end. The crush that he has in the beginning of the movie that is sort of throughout the movie, she goes away. And, like, the older skater friends that he tries to befriend and, like, who brings him in, like, they don't end up being the thing. The thing that is consistent is actually the relationship between him and his mom. And that was something that was fun to play with about, like, you know, I think a lot of movies about friendship make the friendship the lasting thing. And I was like, do that, but also make it not the crux of the story.
Well, and it feels like Boyhood revolves around that as well. Like, our two, like, the, you know, one of the Oscars given to this movie was Patricia Arquette as Mason's mother, Olivia. And so I wanted to hear your take on what you think. I mean, obviously the novel, you know, process of filming in, like, real growth time over the course of a dozen years, seeing these actors and therefore these characters age literally.
What about you? You got a girlfriend?
Sort of.
Really? Have you kissed her?
Not really.
Yeah? What have you done?
We talked on the phone.
Oh, yeah. How'd that go?
Pretty terrible.
Yeah. Why?
Well, when we're at school, we got plenty to talk about, but when we're alone or on the phone, it's like we have nothing in common.
Nothing?
She's not interested in music or video games or 3 best movies this summer.
Right.
Tropic Thunder, Dark Knight, and Pineapple Express.
Yeah, what about
She
them?
said they all sucked.
It's funny because, like, you know, he took over a decade to make this movie. Technically, your movie took, like, 7 years, and you did other projects in between. So did Richard. So, like, movies do take a long time to get made. Like, 12 years and how we did it, absolutely not understanding the achievement. But it's like, well, then there is the truth that, like, movies do kind of take about half that amount of time to get made anyway. Besides that point, what do you think Boyhood, in its, you know, novel approach, did in terms of that kind of same question? Like, where did you find it sort of most satisfying along those sort of coming-of-age framework lines? And where do you feel like it disrupted or innovated or just used the format so masterfully well that it spoke to you?
Well, I mean, I think the unique thing is the concept itself, like filming it over the course of 12 years, essentially Harry Pottering one movie. And I think that it does cast like a spell on you when you get to see this kid grow up before your very eyes. I think there was something very, very surreal about that, watching it in a theater. I think what Boyhood did that I thought was really cool and special, but that I actually wanted to almost try and do the exact opposite of. I felt like Boyhood, and maybe it's the reason it resonates with so many people, is that it encompasses everything. It tries to be the like it's the Soldier Boy needle drop. It like tries to define the era every time it goes to the next year in a way that I think everybody remembers. There's something in it for everyone, which I think with that story, because it's so wide and expansive, actually works incredibly well. And I think what I wanted to try to do was get at the same thing, but from the other side of the coin, which was, again, not not do the Soldier Boy needle drop. Let's actually do the things that didn't define the era and find instead this kid. And like the things that I felt very personal about and the things that really shaped me, and try to show the things about that year that weren't time-stamped by the cultural the things that were culturally relevant during that time for a culture, but maybe for a smaller subculture, and try and get at it in a way that felt hopefully more bespoke and specific.
Well, and I think we're at like a bias as an elder millennial. I am so fascinated by the media digestion, redigestion era that we're in now, because millennials are coming of age to reflect on our formative years, and so it's sort of the era de rigueur to dissect and have essays about and documentaries looking back, kind of thing. I'm selfishly glad that we're at that point, and I think what you say is so indicative of the time that you're filming for in Dìdi, where, like you say, not necessarily the monoculture, not putting the specifics in to harness the monoculture experience of the time, because like working hand in hand with the fact that at that time we are like on the doorstep as well, and and so much transition happening in your film, we are as a society on the doorstep of the shattering of the monoculture. Like the subculture is about to be the prevailing milieu that people explore art in and find things through. And so I wanted to, I guess here I love hearing millennials talk about growing up in that time, and I wanted to hear from you about bringing into a cohesive, single experience, the blasting into a million pieces experience that was being a teen tween at the time your movie is set, and kind of becoming, everybody is the captain of their own pop culture universe at a certain point. And I just wanted to hear from you, like obviously there's your movie, but I wanted to hear from Sean, how Sean feels about that, looking back at that time and the sort of insanity of being the living history of that.
Oh, big question.
Yeah, just
nobody's
simple
ever asked me that question before.
I live my life to ask this question.
No, it's a great question, Jordan. I mean, no, I think I've never really thought about it like that until you just brought it up. But I do feel like, we're in the era we're in now is the era of algorithms, right? And everybody has created bubbles. And I do think, the internet of our movie is the naive version of the internet. It's when things are sort of starting to happen, and even like our online identities were just starting to become extensions of us. Like they weren't, like today, like our online identity is maybe the main identity that people see. It's like they're not usernames anymore, they're your real name.
That's a really good point. Like your AIM name was such like a little character profile of you, and now having an anonymous name is kind of like bot, troll, loser. Like it's kind of indicative of like an unsavory or like flame-throwing character on the internet. Like now usernames are our names.
Yeah. And I think that's an interesting thing to think about, because it's like back then it's, what's your internet personality?
Yeah.
And then now it's like, what's your personality? It's like the version that you curate for, like we are always curating that version of us. But I think back then, it's also the start of these like internet subcultures, right? You're starting to go on forums, that you have the internet, your internet is your internet.
Yeah.
And then the other person's internet and what they look at is their internet, like whether they're on E-Bomb's world, and you're on like all of a sudden there are pockets of culture that are not, dictated by Nickelodeon, MTV, VH1, gatekeepers of like what is defining culture. People are starting to create their own little internet bubbles, and like some kids are on Neopets, or some kids are on RuneScape, some kids are on MapleStory. And I think that was a really fascinating time, because I think that just grew and grew and grew and became, what was an innocent time of the internet has become a bit of a dark Black Mirror type of relationship. But, it was a place where people did connect, and, YouTube, and people were kind of expressing themselves and finding their voice at the same time.
Well, yeah, because I feel like sort of the in vogue, maybe not so much at this exact moment, but in years leading up to this, I feel like it's petering out now. The sort of in vogue cultural invocation was 80s there for a minute. Like, I feel like it really crystallized with Stranger Things. But like a lot of 80s homage, a lot of Gen Xers taking the reins from creative positions in Hollywood and making movies rooted in the things that shaped them, that formed them. A lot of, people doing interviews whose favorite movie is Back to the Future kind of situation. And it is because like when you see those 80s signifier movies, and even seeing like Maxine recently, it didn't do the like neon and triangles and squiggly lines 80s, but it was still such a recognizable visual of like, oh, 1980s, there's it is, bells going off. But then you think back to like starting with where your movie is taking place, it becomes a time where putting 2008, 2005 on screen, there are many recognizable indicators about it, but if you were a subculture kid, if you were, like you said, Neopets, if you were, a little bit later, if you were getting into be like a Tumblr kid, like somebody rendering the year 2008, you could be like, that was absolutely not the fucking year I was living in, how you are giving it to me here, in the way that like if you gave somebody 1999, there's a high recognition of what 1999 would look like to like a en masse audience compared to like, and I think that speaks to like, I appreciate the specificity and the honor to specificity that you approached your movie with, because the devil is in the details when it does get down to like, no, it's got to be the granular, because the macro was starting to dissolve apart from a wide cultural imbibing experience. And we were starting to live in the granules of the internet, which are the tiniest granules of all. And that shapes a creator in a crazy way, I have to imagine.
Yeah, well, I really believe in this, I guess, ethos of if you try to make something for everybody, you make something for nobody.
Right.
Yeah. So, I think that's kind of what we tried to follow with this movie. It was like, it doesn't have to mean everything to everyone, but it has to mean something to somebody. And most of the time that somebody was me, but sometimes it's not.
It's time for a break, but I'll be right back with Sean Wang. And then I will have one quick thing at the very end about the upcoming Alien film, Alien Romulus. I am so excited. So let's just stick around and chat about it at the very end.
Hello, sleepyheads. Sleeping with Celebrities is your podcast pillow pal. We talk to remarkable people about unremarkable topics, all to help you slow down your brain and drift off to sleep. For instance, the remarkable actor Alan Tudyk.
You hand somebody a yardstick after they've shopped at your general store. The store's name is constantly in your heart because yardsticks become part of the family.
Sleeping with Celebrities, hosted by me, John Moe, on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Night-night.
The following are real reenactments of pretend emergency calls.
911. My husband! It's my husband! Calm down, please. What about your husband? He loads the dishwasher wrong. Please help! Please help me! Where are you now, ma'am? At the kitchen table. I was with my dad. He mispronounced his words intentionally.
There are plenty of podcasts on the hunt for justice, but only one podcast has the courage to take on the silly crimes. Judge John Hodgman, the only true crime podcast that won't leave you feeling sad and bad and scared for once. Only on MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back to Feeling Seen. I'm talking with Sean Wang, director of the new film Dìdi, a coming-of-age story inspired by Sean's own youth. Appropriately enough, he is feeling seen by the main character in Boyhood, Richard Linklater's 2014 labor of love that was shot over the course of 12 years.
You like football, Mason?
Not really.
Yeah, I know you don't. That's why I've just assigned you to shoot the football game tonight. Okay? It starts at 7:30. I want you to get there early. I want you to shoot a full card, 300 images. I want them downloaded. I want them sorted, and I want to see them very first thing Monday. Okay? Want to know why I'm doing this?
I guess.
Who do you want to be, Mason? What do you want to do?
I want to take pictures. Make art.
Any dipshit can take pictures, Mason. Art. That's special. What can you bring to it that nobody else can?
That's what I'm trying to find out.
Try harder. Hey, maybe in 20 years you can call old Mr. Turlington and you can say, "Thank you, sir, for that terrific darkroom chat we had that day."
In making something that holds so true to your own experience, because Boyhood, towering achievement in this form, it is still not like the life of Richard Linklater. That's it. Like, it could have been. Maybe that was how this guy grew up, but it was still a character apart from him. Do you need to work in kind of sounding boards over the process of making something like this to be your sort of at an arm's length view of a project like this in a unique way? Because you're working on other things as a filmmaker. Does your approach to this in how you have kind of additional eyes on it or additional perspectives, does that change with other projects you're doing versus how you did it on Dìdi, something that was so personal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when your collaborators come in and people who, and again, like the only person who can really make certain choices is you. And I think the good thing about, by the time I made this movie, I had worked and done documentaries that were like based on my friends and my family. And so I had a little bit of, I knew how to turn things that were real and personal but make sure it worked in the context of a film and a story. I think you see a lot of young filmmakers just sort of like, okay, this is my mom, and it's like, well, what about this is the thing that is specific and unique? I feel like I just learned how to do that in a narrative way, like taking things and then turning it into finding themes. I think that's what you latch onto, like themes. And so I think with this movie in particular, I think with narrative and scripts and anything you do, I think for me, I think in sending scripts to people to read and give feedback and test screenings, all this stuff, I think you're always looking for consensus. You're looking for like, okay, we send this to 10 people. All 10 people think that moment bumps. Well, okay, there's something wrong with that. It's even if it's a personal thing that you love and it's not working for the story.
Sure.
Analyze it, fix it, figure it out. It might not be the problem. It might be the thing around it, but something with that moment is not working. But if you send things to 10 people and then 5 people love it and 5 people are like, I don't get it, that sometimes is a good thing. It can, for us, for example, it was like the language, the kids curse and are kind of crass and there's stuff that's not necessarily correct in today's terms, but it was
very much as the 2000s were.
Exactly. And we never had consensus on that moment of that element of the script, because some people were like, I don't know, it might be a little touchy for today's audiences, and other people would be like, I love how accurate it is. Like, these kids are going to feel like real kids. And it's like, okay, well, that's up to me, as the director, like, what type of movie am I going to make? What kind of, do I want to make one that's watered down, or do I want to try and capture youth as it was? And so I think that element helps, and I can take things that are real and personal, but make sure, like, if they're not serving the story, it's cut it.
Well, and I think watching Boyhood, there, like we've talked about, like Patricia Arquette and the mom in this, but it's probably going to be even more intense, like as I get older, like being a woman and like wanting to have a family one day, kind of thing. But it is just, this movie's just so kind of verite, and how it's not contriving a conflict in the lives of these two kids and this mom. It's just like, yeah, this is what happened. Like, marriage didn't work out with mom. She moved. I'll give her kids a better life. Go to school. Got married. That marriage didn't work out. And like, there's never this moment where it's like, oh, and then like good things happen to them. Like Mason wins an award for his photography. Like he goes off to college. But it's never at any point like, and then their mom won the lottery and everything was easy. And then Mason became like an effervescent extrovert and figured out life and was on his way with a smile. Like it feels difficult kind of in this very accurate way all the way to the very end. And you see Olivia like toward the, into the very end of the movie, like breaking down at just like, the gravity of the passage of time. Like she can't believe how fast these years have gone and her life is by no means all together. It's not like we went on this decade-long journey with her. And then it's like, and she solved it. And now she lives in a nice house and she's teaching at a prestigious university, et cetera, et cetera.
This is the worst day of my life.
What are you talking about?
I knew this day was coming. I didn't know you were going to be so fucking happy to be leaving.
I mean, it's not that I'm that happy. What do you expect?
You know what I'm realizing? My life is just gonna go like that. This series of milestones. Getting married, having kids, getting divorced. The time that we thought you were dyslexic. When I taught you how to ride a bike. Getting divorced again. Getting my master's degree. Finally getting the job I wanted. Sending Samantha off to college. Sending you off to college. You know what's next? Huh? It's my fucking funeral! Just go and leave my picture!
Aren't you jumping ahead by like 40 years or something?
I just thought there would be more.
All this lead up being in your pursuit of wanting the sort of final arc of this movie to be reflective of the like mother-son relationship. And looking at it, in conversation with a movie like Boyhood, what did you learn about the quote unquote, the character of the mother or the mother in the course of you doing this? I feel like that's quite the exercise to play out this arduous relationship on screen and watch an actress like Joan Chen give so much life to this character. And that's a fascinating way to look back at something where you only had your perspective and then you're watching someone give so much evocative perspective who has enough distance to like maybe see it fully for what it is. And then we see a similar thing like that in Olivia. Like, tell me about learning about that character through this process. Was it like, oh shit, I should have been nicer, I guess? Like, damn, I was out here being a real teen jerk to my mom. Like, what is that?
Sure.
That's a fascinating exercise that an artist gets to do.
Yeah, I mean, I really see the movie too as I describe it as it's a thank you to my mom. It's an I'm sorry to my mom. It's an I love you to my mom. It's all the things. It's complicated, but there's a lot of love. And I think that's what the relationship is between the kid and the mom in the movie. It's complicated, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of love. It's just a love that they're maybe speaking in two languages, and it's a language that the other person doesn't speak. There's something that's always lost in translation between the two of them, and they're trying. At the end of the movie, nothing's fixed. There's no big epiphany, but I think for the first time, there is nothing getting in the way. They're trying. There is a spark of something that maybe it's not all good, but it may get better. I learned a lot about both the character in the movie and my own relationship with my mom through writing the character. The character got richer when I would, got to know my mom a little bit more as I, went through my 20s. And so they were kind of informing one another over the course of writing the movie and developing the movie.
Mm-hmm. And when you watch like Boyhood and you say like, connecting to the Mason character, it's been a time, like it came out in 2014. Like when you think about a movie like that, how do you connect differently with characters over time, have you found in perhaps touchpoint coming of age movies that you've watched in your life, like that you think about now, perhaps you rewatch now? Do you find yourself aligning with characters differently in a way that you did when you were younger? You're like, oh wow, I didn't really see that perspective of that person before, that villain, that bully, that grown up, etc.
Yeah, it's been a minute since I've seen Boyhood. I probably haven't watched it since 2014, 2015.
Oh yeah, it had been a long time for me.
And it's a long movie.
It is. It's good it's like I found I was getting the most out of it as like a sort of like museum piece. Like
You have to watch it in a theater.
yeah, like I was it was helping me to like I was like reading interviews while I was doing this, and I was reading about your movie while I was doing this, and I could just like keep checking in, and it was like interesting to just keep like looking up and checking in with these characters' lives as I was going, as their lives are moving a decade ahead.
Yeah. You know, I mean, another movie that I was gonna consider sending that as my character was Hero in Spirited Away. And I think that movie, more than Boyhood, is a movie that I've kind of checked in on over the course of my life. And I don't know if I have an answer about like how I view it differently, but I do remember the first time I watched Spirited Away. I think it's always it's something with my parents, you know, like I watched it with my parents for the first time and I was like, I do not get this movie. Like
in Spirited Away.
Yeah, I mean, I was young. That movie is what, 2002? 2000?
Oh, yeah. Early 2000s, yeah.
Yeah, I was young, and I remember watching it with my parents in theaters, and I was like, this movie's weird. Like, oh my God, masterpiece, da-da-da. And then I watched it later on, you know, and I was like, oh yeah, this movie is incredible, amazing. And then I watched it again later on, and I just, you know, again, it's one of those movies that, you know, doesn't pander to kids. Like it takes Chihiro's emotions and her situation and her like very seriously. And you know, especially, I mean, Spirited Away, the connection point to this movie is probably less obvious, but it was a big inspiration. And again, just trying to take, you know, a young protagonist's emotions and all the things that they're going through seriously. I think Spirited Away does that so amazingly.
Mom, Dad, are you alright? It's me, Zen! Hey, wake up! Mom! Dad! What's wrong with them? Are they sick?
No. They ate too much. They're sleeping it off. They don't remember being human. So look hard. It's up to you to remember which ones they are.
Well, and Chihiro's more of like an irrepressible sort of adventurous type than Mason. And which did you find yourself more as a child? Were you more the Chihiro who was going to go off into the wild? Or were you, you know, Mason, like, gets a talking to from his teachers about, like, your photography's great, but, like, you're really not applying yourself. Were you the kid needing the talking to about applying yourself? Or were you the one who was going to go work in a washroom in a fantastical world beyond the veil of the forest?
I think I was both. I was honestly, like, a perfect mix of both. I think Chihiro is outgoing and finds trouble and goes out and, like, kind of jumps off the cliff a little bit. And then from what I remember is, very reserved, very emo, very in his feels. And I think Chris in our movie is, again, like maybe a blend of the two. He's kind of, you know, irreverent and will find himself in trouble and will go out and seek trouble and create trouble. And then at home, he lies in bed and probably thinks about, like, damn, like, I really fucked up today. And that's what he's done.
Were you an in your head kid? Was that more you?
I was more in my heart than in my head.
Oh, interesting. That's an interesting distinction. A true artist, really.
It was more in my feels than in my thoughts. Yeah.
Well, watching, like, Spirited Away actually came up on this podcast. You mentioned earlier that, like, the movie has to, like, in a coming-of-age context, a movie has to be about, like, that kid, not just a kid. And there, like, needs to be, not a universality, but, like, a sort of big net that it casts for you to feel like, hey, even though I'm watching this kid, like, what they're going through is really resonating with me in my specific experience, too, and so it becomes the relatability in the specific. But two, like, it's not like we were awash, like, growing up as millennials with coming of age stories of Asian and Asian immigrant, Asian American households. Was that a lack of specificity that you felt as a kid watching movies growing up? Or did you feel like that kid representation of other movies you were seeing was providing that sort of like comfort of recognition, or that sort of like, you know, Leo pointing at the screen kind of satisfaction in you?
Both, you know. I think when I saw movies like Stand By Me again and like 400 Blows and Wreck, like I resonated with all those movies. I saw a version of myself in all those movies. And I love all those movies. You know, This Is England, and like I'm not a white kid, you know, like but I resonate, and I'm not a Parisian kid, you know, and I understood those boys. I understood their struggles. I understood that what they were feeling, you know. I think that was the thing that was the connective tissue for all of those stories. And really it was just like, well, if I see myself in those stories with those protagonists that I don't demographically align with, I think, why not the opposite? Why can't I tell our version of the story that has things that are very specific to, you know, a Taiwanese American boy in this context? But I think if the specifics are just, again, an access point to what I think all of those movies share, which is, again, the universal emotion, right? Like for me, if our movie is about shame and belonging and friendship, everyone understands the feeling of, you know, those emotions. How we get there is hopefully the way that's different. And specific. And so that was the hope, right? It's like, I see myself in all these stories that I don't demographically align with. Why not? Like, sure, other people can see themselves in our movie.
In going through the exercise of, like you said, like shame and growth, and putting a character that is something of an avatar for yourself on screen, did you find that, you know, are you like, okay, yeah, at this place in my life, I can look at those feelings I had then, and I can see how I have, like, moved to a healthy relationship with those, you know, a healthy relationship with the inside out emotions that are, you know, fear and shame and anxiety show up in the sequel kind of thing. Like, do you, like, it's an interesting, I feel like it's an interesting avenue to look at and be like, have I worked with and on and through those things that I was struggling with as much as an adolescent as I wish I had up to this point? Or are you like, damn, those demons die hard, and like I see how the things I battled then are still with me now? Like, does present you who got to write previous version of you feel like you have distance from those trials and tribulations in a way that's like, I'm so glad with where I am now? Or is there still kind of that like pang of like processing and the work left to be done?
Maybe like a healthy balance of both. You know, certainly there was like stuff that I think part of the reason of working on the movie for so long too was like, oh, it is an active process of learning. But there's certain things I'm just like, oh, like I realize it's not like a new thing that got opened. It was like I realized it's like there was a lot of recontextualizing. You know, so it was both. It was like a healthy balance of recontextualizing and then realizing new things.
Well, and I guess my getting into like the last question, something I was curious about, not necessarily related to what kind of movies were you super into when you were that age? When you were watching stuff, what did you get a kick out of on Friday and Saturday nights? What was your early drug of choice at the cinema?
Drug of choice at the cinema. I loved Charlie Kaufman's movies.
Wow, a cinesta to start.
Yeah, cinesta. I love Eternal Sunshine. I love surreal things. And I was really, really, really personally connected to like movies about music. Like just music-driven movies. Movies that like had an original soundtrack attached to it. Like music and lyrics for once. Or Inside Llewyn Davis. I just always really, really loved those types of movies.
Was that an affinity to music that you had personally that just like it carried over, like so it was thematically something you enjoyed, or was there just something especially evocative about the way music worked through narrative like that?
I don't know. I think there was something really special and cool that I thought was like, oh, this movie is like an album. And you know, a lot of times I would fall in love with the movie and then fall in love with its score. But when it was like a movie, I got to fall in love with the soundtrack. It was like I got to watch the movie in music form afterwards. And I grew up playing music in some capacity. I took piano lessons for a decade and a half, basically. And I was not a good student, but I would love watching movies about music and falling in love with their scores. And I would go find the sheet music for Spirited Away, for all of Joe Hisashi's and you know, any band that had a pianist or anything, and I would find their sheet music and print it out and not learn the songs I was supposed to, and instead try to learn, you know, the Disney songbook or you know, Once and all this stuff. So I don't know. I've always had a soft spot for movies like that.
Well, I hope, relatedly to music and being a millennial, that you, like the rest of us, had your moment with the Garden State soundtrack, and that put the indelible impact on your life that it did so many of us.
The Gins is it's up there.
Well, Sean, I've come to the end of my time with you, but I'm so appreciative that you took the time to talk with us today. I truly appreciate you coming on the pod.
Thank you for having me, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Good luck out there, and good luck with the movie and the next movie and the one after. Thank you to Sean Wang. Get out there and see Dìdi in theaters. Support small and independent cinema, guys. I know it's blockbuster season, but yeah, we have a duty to care for the intimate movies in our charge. So please go support Dìdi. Check it out. It opens this very day as the episode has dropped. And if you have never caught Boyhood or want to relive Mason's life, like most of his life, that movie is streaming on Canopy, Roku, Criterion Channel, and lots of other places. And now, that one quick thing before I go, we're going from independent cinema to bigger cinema. I'm just so excited for Alien Romulus, you guys. Fede Alvarez is directing it. As you might already know, surely you do if you're a horror fan, he is the one who brought us the 2013 revival of Evil Dead, that lean and mean modern horror classic, that Jane Levy starring vehicle. And then he made Don't Breathe, and now he is bringing us this. And I was already super pumped, and then I was in the Grove Theater in Los Angeles where they had a display of a life-size xenomorph model, and it was so awesome. I talked to somebody else who was looking at it about H.R. Giger, and that's the kind of bonding you want to do in a movie theater. That's why movie theaters are sanctuaries for movie fans, because you meet strangers and you say H.R. Giger to them and their faces light up, and that's the dream. Yeah, that's it. Like, Kaylee Spaney, guys. A woman of range, a woman of texture, going from Priscilla to Civil War to Alien Romulus in the span of like a year is an insano run. Yeah, it looks scary. It looks mean. I mean, as we know, Fede Alvarez makes like mean, punch you in the throat kinds of movies. That looks like exactly what we can expect of Romulus. And yeah, the summer season is really delivering for us horror fans. I had a blast with the little Maxine. That's a little, it's like, you know, it looks like the glitziest of the trilogy, even if it too was a lean little enterprise. Longlegs has broken box office records for Neon. It has eclipsed Hereditary's run at the box office. It is killing it out there. We've got Cuckoo on the way, also from Neon. We've got Alien Romulus coming to us. Quiet Place Day One, I think, was my favorite Quiet Place movie, and it roared through the box office. So yeah, we are awash in good stuff. The summer of scare continues, and I'm grateful for it. Let's all go to the movies, and let's put Alien Romulus on our to-do list. And that is our show. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at FeelingSeenPod, or send us an email at feelingseen@MaximumFun.org. If you want to follow me, I'm Jorcrew on Twitter. Our theme music is by Andrew Epen. The show is produced by Marissa Flaxbart. Our senior producers are Kevin Ferguson and Laura Swisher, and this is a production of Maximum Fun.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows.
supported
directly
by you.